The Synchronist, Version 2 of the Deus Intellectus series, Book 1, by M. Kaiba. This book is dedicated to my mother, who gave life by sacrifice of her own. Forward. Thank you for joining with me into the Deus Intellectus series. We hope this book finds you in the best of health. We hope Deus Intellectus inspires, stimulates your mind, and encourages you to embrace the divine within yourself. You are a beautiful person. The fact that you've decided to open this literary work says great volumes about you and your current position on planet Earth. You are, not necessarily by direct association with Deus Intellectus, a very special soul. We are beyond excited, pleased, and honored that you have decided to move forward with us on this spectacular journey by digging deeper into the vast and interesting spaces within yourself in order to explore the divine intellect. This book is a philosophical discourse that revolves around a variety of concepts. In this installment, we explore the Synchronist, which is the name for one who strives, prioritizes, and allows being in sync with all that is. The Synchronist is one who wishes to obtain being in sync for the ultimate, detachment, peace, exploration of the self, extinguishing resistance, and to understand Godhood and the relationship to it. The Synchronist is embracing and allowing the divine to be, act through, and successfully direct the life of the individual. This work is meant to directly bend and break the superficial laws that bind the intellectuals around the world. This book is an effort to obliterate obstacles and act as a mirror for the human's hidden potentiality. It is to, in some cases, grow the ego to a state of explosion or implosion and vanish it from the existence, even if only temporarily. This book is a symbol of and a successful effort to bring peace to the individual and existence on, at least, an atomic level. This book is to open doors within the mind, as well as to establish new doors for obliteration. This book is an exercise of the divine intellect. This book is the creation of the sun, the moon, and the stars in the beginning. This book is the beginning that has always been. Deus Intellectus is broken up into 8 chapters, or planets. Before we dive into the depths of the first chapter, we are greeted from a letter from Kaiba, a god who in his past life was a human being. Kaiba has written a letter to all that may find it, and we have inserted it here in the Synchronist. Kaiba knows that all who find it will do so at the appropriate time, and therefore does not address it to anyone directly by name, but simply refers to them as reader. We felt it to be an appropriate opening for this book. The introduction explains why this book has been made. It explains the fractured state that the human being is currently absorbed in, and prepares us for our journey through the Synchronist. The first 2 chapters are lessons directed at the general public. These are the basic understandings one must possess in order to move beyond the shallow and manipulative dialogue that is had about self-realization, centeredness, and divinity in general. Many of the great institutions in the world are great because of their focus on exploiting people's desires that develop in the religious quarters of the planet. In general, people are able to obtain some emotional comfort by being involved as members of religious institutions, but they often are no more intellectual, no more in control of their lives, and no more spiritually inclined or self-realized than those who do not mingle within the systems of religious authorities. In actuality, the general person involved with these institutions can gain some sort of comfort or false sense of heightened perspective in exchange for their body, their energy, and their resources that help maintain the power of the church. Here, we grant individuals the fundamental building blocks to move beyond the commonly used spiritual and religious jargon that is used to imprison the people. Readers will be able to identify falsehood more clearly, as well as have an improved understanding of language and how it affects our reality. Without this basic understanding, the individual is not granted access to the parts of the mind that help transform the experience in the material world. Material world being the physical, tangible reality. With this literature, We want to offer an alternative mode of thinking that does help the individual be able to exchange their experience, and we want the reader to be totally conscious and immersed in that transformative experience. When this is done successfully, the human being on the individual level will not be bound by excessive contemplation or overthinking. They will react intuitively to their experience as though they are not acting at all. As a result, the individual becomes free from the self. The third chapter is specifically constructed for those who are interested in obtaining, realizing, and feeling their godhood. This is the beginning of the synchronist philosophy. Here the individual learns about how being synchronized is true freedom from the self. The fourth, fifth, and sixth chapters specifically address the synchronist philosophy in detail. These chapters explain how the mind, the heart, and the body must become as one. It addresses each of these components separately in their respective chapters. It also addresses each of these aspects of the experience, mind, heart, and body, in the current fractured state. We get an understanding of the primary focus of the three chapters, and later we gain understanding for how these things are being disrupted and fractured. The seventh chapter is about God, the synchronized. This chapter helps us understand who God is, how God is, and the attributes of God. This is the level of understanding we reach as a synchronist. The eighth and final chapter reflects on the fractured world that is briefly displayed in previous chapters. It explains the artificial world in which we occupy and how it is built as a functioning method of desynchronizing the individual. This chapter helps us meditate on the intricate developments in society that are made to keep us from easily understanding and realizing our godhood. Once again, we would like to thank you and all who have made this book an actuality, and we hope that you are inspired to embrace your transformation, explore philosophy, and realize the potential that you wield within your extraordinary mind. Enjoy these lessons, meditate on them, feel them, walk with them, share them, contemplate them, process them, let them fall upon your skin, let them transform you, let the words be you, transform again and again. The synchronist addresses some concerns and interpretations about the world. Many of these interpretations point to the general notion that the human being is fearful. The human being is full of fear in a way an individual may be irrationally fearful of fire. Because the fire has the ability to burn the individual, out of fear, they see no need to harness the light and heat of fire to save themselves from the ignorance of darkness. The individual is so afraid of the small chance of being burned that they do not dare imagine how to become a firebender, and then avoids the potential that resides within the glorious flame. She claims to prefer being in the darkness of ignorance. And in this age, the human being has access to all the elements, earth, wind, water, and fire. Yet it is most fearful of the fire that is purposed to lead them out of the darkness of ignorance, give life, and incinerate their enemies. The fearful do not succeed in self-development, but instead succeed in finding some intoxicant to numb the senses. For it is fear that attempts to distract the mind from its own self-inflicted despair with the stimulation of various drugs and frivolous entertainment. The human being has access to all tools and key components to save itself and reach new blissful heights of being, but yet and still, due to the complexity and infinite nature of their existence, the human being would often prefer to be imprisoned and destroyed. The human being in this condition has generally zero interest in becoming truly better. The human being only has interest in gaining some small, fading pleasures on their way to the grave. Almost all obligations that the human being believes they are responsible for fulfilling are all things that the human being has placed upon themselves and thus has no deeper meaning than beyond what is conceptually placed on them. In actuality, the human being has zero obligations and is free to do as they please, yet in their minds they hold themselves responsible for fulfilling certain duties in order to enslave themselves, because in their fractured state the individual desires to be the causer and architect of their own misery. Peace and love. End of foreword. Prologue. A letter from Kaiba. Dear reader, all of my experiences are pulling me to a moment where every lesson learned is one that must destroy a branch of weakness within my own being, within the cosmic order of all things. All my experiences are pulling me toward a moment of total acceptance and are revealing what is truly possible through the intellect. The stage has been set. The theme is unrighteousness. The hero must rise and slay the wicked once again. The stage has been set. Here I stand, sword in hand, hoping that I am finally ready for this moment I've been waiting for all of my life. Here I stand, entertaining the voices in my head that say the sword is too heavy and that I cannot lift it. And if I do lift this heavy burden that I placed upon myself, can I strike at the heart of the demon? Do I wield the dominance and the fortitude to go onward, to survive? I am weakening myself. How can one who is God himself question himself? Why does God know of doubt? Why does perfection entertain imperfection? I move towards my fears, sword in hand. I move towards my anxiety, sword in hand. I move toward that tense feeling that is deep in the center of my chest, and I grit my teeth at the chance for demolishing it for good, for righteousness, for peace, for love, for myself, and for her. I can't believe I've been granted this power, but it has proven me weak in some of the most troubling areas. But it is always the weakest areas that are the most troubling, I realize. But I have let go of those things. I do not hear those voices any longer. I do not feel their words any longer. And I move toward all anxiety in my world, and I am unaffected. I do not need to fight. I am unaffected. I am unaffected. I am unaffected. I am seated as neutral. I am seated as supreme, seated as Deus, established in the self. The strings of the soul are pulled and played. The minds of the populace are corrupt and poorly calculated. The earth will cook its demons. I will run to the sun with sword in hand. I will run to the sun with sword in hand. I will understand and accept. I will obliterate and rest. I will record and conquer. I will transcend and move upward. I will establish myself in my fortress. I will resume my role in the kingdom with my sword in hand, with my sword in hand, with my sword. I will not hold back any longer. I will accept my position and break all rules. I will love totally. I will love until I am extinguished by time. These walls confine me. These walls do not liberate me. These walls confine me. These walls say that I am not ready. These walls tell me that I am not ready. These walls tell me that I am not large enough, that I am not strong enough. These walls tell me. These walls are not my friend. These walls are my enemy. Every single second of mental conditioning through propaganda must be cleansed from the person's being and must be extracted and removed in order to realize divinity. For these walls are a trap and are programming the mind to think under certain circumstances and thus causing anxiety that brews seemingly from nothingness. This must be obliterated. Meditate and remove yourself from this. Meditate and accept the actual. Meditate and be free. MK. End of letter. Introduction. The story of the Synchronist. So as long as you still see the stars as something above you, you still lack the eye of the man of knowledge. Beyond Good and Evil. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1886. The universe has become fractured. This fractured state of the universe has become so by the permission of the universe itself. All divisions are essentially a phenomena of the mind which makes our material world illusory. By fractured I also mean divided. And though this separation and division of itself by itself, synchronicity has become more and more uncommon. Synchronicity and balance are not currently the consistent modes of the universe. Though its division and separateness, through its categories and classifications, we have become out of sync, out of our balance and off-centered. The oneness, all that is, has fractured itself into many other universes, creating a multiverse. And since the oneness has no limits, it has divided and fractured itself into an infinity. The individual may say that this is a great misfortune for the species of the world, that being out of our balance is something fundamentally wrong, that this is not the way things should be. Who is to blame for this tragedy of separateness among the cosmos? How do we fix things? These are, of course, valid questions, but these questions are only a part of the problem. For the thinking individual is the one to blame for this fractured oneness, and therefore can only pursue to understand themselves. For no truly conscious individual is broken. Thus there is no need for fixing anything whatsoever. Instead, the individual only needs to gain a clearer understanding. Because of the fracturing of the universe, the mind itself is also fractured. It has divided itself into so many categories and subcategories that the universe must mirror such. And as a result, there is a multiverse and an infinity of verses within verses. Every category, subcategory, or mode of thinking is in itself a universe. Every organism or item is a representative of a mode or universe, just as though one cannot fully know the intimate details of what happens on a cellular level inside themselves, inside the mind of another individual, or the moods and modes inside the house of a neighbor, or the conversations and moods inside of another country. One cannot fully bear witness to the intimate details of what occurs at other planets, outside of the solar system and beyond what are the known dimensions of the universe. Because of this fractured state of what was whole now seemingly operates as its own, unbeknownst to the holistic infinity that is. Biologists now think you have an even closer and more ancient relationship with bacteria than you might think. They not only live on and in you, but you actually carry the descendants of ancient bacteria inside every cell of your body. You aren't just a house for bacteria. In a very real sense, you are bacteria. Cells within cells. An extraordinary claim with extraordinary evidence. Every cell is its own realm of experience and existence. Likely totally different from the human experience, it also is in its own right a universe. What is beyond our experience is the unknown, and what is not known in our universe is the unknown. Just like what is beyond our immediate modes of perception are unknown. To transform or change modes means to literally transcend to different universes. Indeed, every planet is its own universe, every idea is its own universe, and every single individual idea is merely a manifestation of an illusion of a fractured state that appears to maintain itself materially. But in actuality, there is no true division among what is. The mind has created the illusion that there is something separate from it, that it produces concepts and that there are a variety of those concepts. But in actuality, there is nothing. The mind has literally established a mirage of various material objects and entertains immaterial concepts. But in actuality, these are all projections of the mind, the source. The human experience is like the rays of light from the sun. The sun, like the mind, is the supreme source of light, energy, and life. And directly from the sun, light rays are projected. This emittance of light is acknowledged by the appearance of material objects. For if there were no visual sensation of material tangible objects, the material world and material experience would therefore be defined differently, as would language change and only a felt experience would be had, and thus a consistent sensation of touch, smell, and sound. If there were no material experience verifiable by sight, we would have no certainty of the characteristics for particular objects. For example, we would not know of an object's color, and therefore color would be a more commonly regarded as an abstract immaterial concept, like the spirit or spiritual energy. The mind projects, like rays of light, particular objects into experience based upon some very limited sensory input gained through contact with the physical, which manifests and is under jurisdiction of the assumptions of the mind. For example, the human being may see the physical nature that they deem themselves, but to regard themselves as one thing as opposed to another, and to not include the other areas of experience as a one holistic expansion of the one experience, is simply the translation and breakdown of data that we now call sensory input. But this phenomena of sensory input, the physical reacting with the physical, and this formulating and processing of data is a phenomenon as spectacular as the planet staying in orbit. It has no explanation beyond that it is happening. And that's what the human experience is, a communication and relationship of something that is happening. And beyond it, it becomes more difficult to explain. We need not to find out why this is happening. We need only to look into ourselves, because in ourselves lies the reason, because we are the creators. Now, the individual, by the pursuit of understanding, enhancing imaginative power, increasing in faith and physical upkeep, will take all fractured universes and synchronize them all into one. The results are health, enhanced intuition, and freedom of the intellect to not be burdened by the entrapments of the mind. Despite all the apparent issues that plague the world, if one's perspective and mental well-being does not change, how can we expect the reversal of our plummet into the abyss? End of introduction. Chapter 1. Basic Understandings. Reality. One must understand the difference between reality, facts, and the truth. There is a very fine line between these concepts, which often leads us to misinterpreting them as synonymous. First, reality is the mode of experience of the individual consciousness. There are several different realities, as will be explained and expanded on in the subchapters. For example, the dream world is its own reality. The hallucination is its own reality. The waking life is its own reality, etc. Since the reality or experience of the individual is dependent on the perspective, state of mind, and outward mental projection, this creates the so-called physical world. Once understood, this thesis becomes easy to ascertain. Second, facts are the statements that can be made about the relationship of realities through mathematics. Mathematics, as it pertains to numbers, is the relationship of laws and code through symbols. For example, for one to understand a language or that 2 plus 2 equals 4, they would have to have an understanding of the laws of that language, in this case, mathematics. They must understand that these particular individual symbols, 2 plus 2 equals, in such a particular order, is to conjure up a particular concept, that concept being 4. These numbers are merely ideas, and mean nothing on their own to people who do not understand the code and laws of this language of mathematics. These symbols mean everything based upon the code or language in which they are to be interpreted, which then gives these symbols meaning. For someone who is familiar with the language, they can identify those lines as symbols, and those symbols as a means to complete a mathematical equation of expression. To one who does not know the laws of the language, they are not likely to interpret those symbols the same way as someone who is familiar with the mathematical language. In order for a mathematical equation to be understood and legitimate, other assumptions or assertions must be made in order to give these lines of expression context, so that they may be interpreted as symbols and thus conjure up a particular implications and actions. In order for us to know that the final symbol in this expression should be 4, we must have some context for what the symbols that come before it function as. This is the method of understanding. Language is code, which is to understand that language is to impose immaterial laws on material experience. The facts are the true statements that can be made about something, in the context to the laws that are implied to be interpreted. Under the laws of basic mathematics, 2 plus 2 equals 4. In the context to one hallucinating, they may think they are experiencing the visual sensation of something that may not be actually existing materially. These are the facts. The facts are the particular true statements that can be made based upon the structure in which they are expected to be interpreted. There are many, many facts, and facts can seem to contradict one another. Geometry does not deal with material things like a string or a sheet of paper, but with abstract lines and surfaces. Nor does geometry deal with actual facts. It only shows what would be true if certain other things were true. We apply some statement of geometry to a string or to a sheet of paper whenever the conditions of the statement seem to be fulfilled, and the correctness of the result depends upon whether the conditions are fulfilled. Even the axioms of geometry, formerly regarded as self-evident truths, are now understood to be merely hypotheses. The mathematician does not say that the axioms are true. He develops a set of propositions that follow necessarily from the axioms, and are involved in the axioms themselves. But the axioms themselves he can change, and by taking different sets of axioms, he can build up different geometries, each geometry mathematically true. True, and that it is a set of statements or theorems necessarily involved in the set of axioms upon which it is built. It is necessary that the axioms chosen for a geometry shall be consistent. They must not contradict one another. They ought also to be independent. No statement should be taken as an axiom if it necessarily follows from the other axioms. Finally, the set of axioms should be complete, so that the geometry is completely determined without requiring additional axioms. We choose, then, one of these geometries and apply it to our lives. We choose that geometry whose axioms and resulting theorems seem best to express the conditions of our existence. But this choice is not a part of mathematical reasoning. It is a matter of experiment and of experience. Finally, the mathematician may go still further and leave undefined the subject matter of his geometry. He takes certain elements, calling them points and lines, and certain relations which he calls relations of position and magnitude. Without defining the elements or the relations, he assumes that the elements have these relations. The statements that the elements have these relations are his axioms. From the axioms, he derives other relations, which necessarily follow. The statement of these relations are his theorems. This is abstract geometry. The terms used are meaningless, whether they are the words point, line, intersect, etc., borrowed from the ordinary geometry or new words invented for the purpose. It is easier, of course, to assign meanings to the terms at the beginning and give it to the geometry a concrete form as it develops, especially if the concrete form is not too difficult for us to picture in our minds. But it is possible to construct the geometry abstractly and then to apply it by giving concrete meanings to its terms. By changing the meanings of the terms, we can give to the same geometry more than one interpretation, even when the geometry is first constructed in concrete form. When the student gets this view of geometry fixed in his mind, he is more ready to entertain the notion of geometry of 4 or more dimensions. He sees no difficulty in assuming a set of axioms which includes the hypothesis that there are points outside of the given space of 3 dimensions, when points in space are themselves words without meaning. The difficulty which he meets in contemplating such a geometry or any geometry comes when he attempts to apply it to our existence or to some imagined existence where its application seems to contradict or transcend our experience. The 4th Dimensions, Simply Explained. Henry P. Manning, 1910. The truth is the consistent one whole of all that is and is not. The facts make up the truth. But the truth is beyond facts, because it is made up of what is known, facts, and what is unknown. It is all things. It is all-encompassing because it takes into account all possibilities and all other worlds, realities, and experiences. The truth maintains itself beyond all sensations. For example, one may see the front of a statue. This is their reality, their experience. They may only be able to see the front of the statue. And if this were the case, based upon what it means to see the front, etc., then this would be a matter of fact. They may not be able to see the back of the statue and therefore cannot confirm, based upon their current perspective, that there is a back to the statue. This is also a matter of fact, but the truth maintains that there may be other sides of the statue regardless if they are experienced or not. And those sides may be experienced if one were to change their perspective. The truth is fluidity of language. The truth is like water. It is beyond language, yet within it. It is the way. Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Reality. The quality or state of being real. Real. Occurring or existing in actuality. Actual. Existing in fact or reality. Fact. The quality of being actual. According to typical interpretations, what is reality is dependent on what we identify as real. What is real is dependent on what is actual. And what is actual is dependent on what is fact. And what is fact is dependent on what is actual, which is in turn dependent on what we identify to be fact or reality. These standard definitions reflect the standard method on understanding what is real and what is not. With these standard definitions, we may only initiate a futile pursuit in understanding misused words that misguide and circle us back to the original words that initiated the search. We get no clear and direct understanding of what reality is by studying the words themselves, and therefore we must attempt to look beyond them. If you were to look up the definition of reality within standard dictionaries, you would fall short in finding a definitive standard of qualities that deem a particular aspect of experience legitimate as opposed to counterfeit. You will be no more equipped to empirically identify a false experience than before reading the definitions above. Let's examine further and gain an understanding. Language is used to confuse. It is used to get people to fill in the equation, to engage in a particular action. By understanding the power, purposes, and fluidity of language, we may be able to rearrange language and thus direct our own lives by avoiding the oppressive direction of others. Through synchronizing, we choose not to fill in their equation. There are 3 concepts I would like for you to entertain. 1. The idea of God. 2. Dreams. And 3. Time. 1. God. Part 1. For most, since ideas in themselves are not material, they remain as mental phenomena. For even if one were to believe in the existence of God, they would typically admit that the idea of God in itself is not a real thing, but may still maintain that God himself is indeed real and therefore an existing thing. For those that are atheists, it would be appropriate to assume that since God be only an idea, God also, as a result, does not exist. God can be realized on several levels. One of these levels is in concept. Whether or not God exists in the material or whether or not perfection be actual or obtainable in the material is not the emphasis here. Instead, it is emphasized that the concept of these things in themselves make themselves, at least on the level of concept and conceptually, God is. Furthermore, if one maintains that the idea of perfection only exists as an idea, and as a result, perfection cannot be found anywhere in our material, tangible experience, then that lack of material form becomes an attribute of the concept of perfection. A concept which occupies the intellect, and no example of itself can be found in the material world. It is an idea that can assist the individual of coming to realization and understanding other ideas. Through concepts of God and perfection we realize. Realizations may seemingly manifest differently in varying contexts. For example, a religious person may come to realize, based off the notions of a relationship with the concept of God, that all is conceptual and the mind is supreme. A seemingly religious person or someone who appears to be very attracted to religious customs, rituals, philosophy, and ideology may become so obsessed with the rituals of worshiping God that they may become mad. Similarly, an artist may become so obsessed with creating the perfect painting that they become mad. These sorts of obsessions with concepts may manifest themselves in our experiences as what we generally call addictions, perversions, depressions, unhappiness, unhealthiness, and the like. But it is these very same concepts, God and perfection, that can bring us to the realization that is beneficial. To focus on God's so-called non-existence would be on some level to denounce the ultimate power of the mind, while simultaneously effectively exercising that same mental power. 2. Dreams. Dreams are typically seen as the antithesis of so-called reality. Since dreams typically occur in sleep, they, unlike our waking lives, tend to be seen as merely a subject of imagination, and therefore are not real. Dreams themselves are also not tangible things, and as a result are often purely regarded as mental phenomena. Since dreams are ideas of the mind which may vary in intensity, they are too often regarded as not real. Reality and experience are both components of the truth. There are many different realities and there are many true statements that can be made about those realities and the truth itself. These true statements, facts, are many, intertwined, and holistic. There are true statements that can be made about every reality or experience, no matter how bizarre. All of the affirmations made by the human being about its experience arise parallel with its negation. These concepts, which are sometimes vocalized, are indeed affirmations utilized to define and shape experience by the mind. The affirmations are either true or false, depending on the context in which they are intended to be interpreted, based on which concepts those affirmations, for lack of a better phrase, immediately relate. Let us suggest that a human being may hallucinate that they are riding down the highway on a unicorn instead of their motorcycle, for indeed this experience is a reality. In this circumstance, the human being is really experiencing the illusion of riding the unicorn on the highway, and for them, experiencing an illusion is a part of their reality. They are really experiencing an illusion. There are likely many true statements that can be made about any experience, reality, or hallucination in general. For example, it may follow that the unicorn in a vision appears to be white and must appear to have a horn sticking from its head. If the unicorn appears to be a particular way, then it is a true statement. That which appears to be a unicorn appears to be a particular sort of way. This hallucination itself may not be regarded as reality when compared to the experience of those not hallucinating. But that individual is really hallucinating, and in this case, is really perceiving a material world cloaked an illusion. Now, what is true about this situation in the relationship and context to other experiences or interpretations is a slightly different matter. A true statement may be made about an experience or circumstance. These true statements are a part of the constant truth, which is always bound to a relationship of notions. For example, there appears to be a unicorn may be a true statement, but another fact of the matter, which makes up the truth, may be that the unicorn is not material and only appears to be so. It also may be true insofar as other people cannot experience the unicorn that appears to be in the individual's hallucination. The truth is a constant collection and intertwined relationship between all notions, material and immaterial. This means that reality and the truth are not synonymous. For the synchronists, the life we experience in dreams is no less real than the life we experience when we are awake. For the synchronists, those two worlds are like brother and sister. One is not superior or more valid than the other. Now, what is the truth about these dreams once we wake up, or about how the laws in the dream world differ from that in the waking life, is a separate matter. We can conclude various truths from either experience, but both of them intertwine to make elements of the truth, which is constant, transcends boundaries, and is in a consistent relationship with everything that is and is not. The dream is an experience, and all experiences make up the one human experience. All experiences make up our reality. Reality is who we are. Our experiences are who we are, whether awake or sleeping. This is why our dream life, despite people considering it as not real, still has a profound effect on our waking life, and vice versa. These two realities are in a strong relationship with one another, and in order to understand oneself and the universe, it would be wise to not downplay our experiences. We should look into our experiences and meditate on them with love, kindness, and patience in the heart. Note: I have found it useful to keep a dream journal. It might be wise to try a few weeks of documenting your experiences in the dream world because we often forget them so soon after waking. I recommend keeping a journal and pen near your bed so that when you awake, you can quickly write down what you experienced while your body was asleep. Try to be clear in details and write down colors, smells, tastes, etc. Try your best to be as detailed as possible. Once you start collecting written accounts of your experiences in the dream world, you will be able to more easily revisit those memories when you refer back to your dream journal. This can help you maintain a physical record of things that your conscious mind in the waking life oftentimes leaves blurred within the intricate depths of the subconscious. Not only can it be fun to write and contemplate the meaning and the feeling of dreams, but it also is a great opportunity to confront your deepest fears, desires, and aspects of oneself that are oftentimes ignored due to the overstimulation and societal pressures of our waking life. Sleeping is a gateway to what people often refer to as alternate dimensions and realities. The things projected in our minds during this time of healing should be a reminder to us of what is beyond. Your dreams are real. Your dreams are your life. 3. Time. Time, though often regarded as real, is like all ideas in themselves not tangible. Watches and clocks are indeed tangible and are therefore real objects, but time itself is not a tangible thing. The concept of time is a quite unique concept because even though it is not material, it is still often regarded as real. For most, in order for something to be real, it must have a presence in the material. It must take up space. But for time, this rule for reality and actuality being material does not usually apply. Despite time being immaterial, there is still some notion that encourages those to identify it as existing or real. One may begin to think of several things that they regard as real, though they may not be material. These things may be like days of the week or the months in a year. Regardless, the truth of the matter is, everything, the above mentioned included, are concepts or ideas first and foremost. In conclusion, since all three of the above concepts are essentially ideas, we then may ask if those ideas are to be direct representatives of things in the material, tangible world. Since no idea in itself is material, there may only be material things that manifest in order to act as a representation or be in association with a particular idea, which does not exist in space. What we understand about ideas in the material world is that what is real is usually not spoken of so transparently. The term is usually used as a tool to discredit, invalidate, or shame some particular concept. When we look deeper, what we discover is that all concepts, whether intended to be direct representations of material objects or not, are built upon a sort of mathematical law. These laws are enforced upon the mind and thus divides the physical experience into components. This division is to incite particular actions and creates a language for what is. What is real is the reality, which is the experience. Within the experience, there may be things that appear to be so or miscalculations about that experience, but all of it makes up that particular reality. The facts are the correct calculations about that reality. For example, in your waking life, if you drop a pencil out of your window, it will fall to the ground. If you then drop a pencil out of your window and it falls to the ground, this has been an accurate calculation. It has been known and experienced and has thus been proven as fact. But this one equation, this particular circumstance, does not mean that in all cases, if a pencil is dropped, that it will hit the ground. In some other modes of reality, it may hit water, it may be suspended in the air by another object after being let go. If this is a dream world, it may vanish before falling, it may float upwards into space, anything could happen. This equation for what is expected to happen works in a particular hidden implied context that does not exist in the equation. It is invisible. Just as one writes 2 + 2 = on a chalkboard, it is usually expected that the action of writing 4 will follow. And though one can write any symbol, shape, or number to conclude the equation, they can also erase or walk away from the equation altogether. Mathematics and language is an implied law that is to keep objects and ideas in their desired place. It is a manner of matter manipulation, of world construction. This implied law is a mental construction and therefore can be disregarded at any time. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Basic Understandings. Concepts. Life is a rhythm that must be comprehended. I feel the rhythm and direct on it and pamper in it. It was very grateful and gave me the knowledge I have. Everything that lives is related to a deep and wonderful relationship. Man and the stars, amoebas and the sun, the heart and the circulation of infinite number of worlds. These ties are unbreakable, but they can be tame and to propitiate and begin to create new and different relationships in the world, and that does not violate the old. Knowledge comes from space. Our vision is its most perfect set. We have two eyes, the earthly and spiritual. It is recommended that it becomes one eye. Universe is alive in all its manifestations, like a thinking animal. Stone is a thinking, sentient being, such as plant, beast, and man. A star that shines, ass to look at, and if we are not a sizable self-absorbed, we would understand its language and message. His breathing, his eyes and ears of the man must comply with breathing. Eyes and ears of the universe. Nikola Tesla, 1899. By gaining an understanding of ideas and how they work within our world, we gain an understanding of the practical day-to-day circumstances in which we do not usually hold much importance. Through understanding ideas at their basic level, we understand the power of language, the power of the individual, and how seemingly passive language is used to submit us to authority. Without understanding the meaning and origin of words and ideas, we merely react to them automatically. If we gain an understanding, we may gain insight and consciously decide whether or not to react to the ideas projected on us from others. Thus, everything is ultimately conceptual, and if it can be thought, said, or demonstrated that there is anything that is and or not so, that too is ultimately a matter of concept. By concept, I mean idea, and by anything, I mean all that exists and whatever its opposite. What are the implications if this is valid or true? Here, the question is answered thus. Through the mental construction of new ideas and deconstruction of many, this chapter grants unlimited access to abilities, knowledge, and the so-called alternate levels of reality, maybe otherwise known as alternate realities altogether. This is what is described as the infinite dimensions, which will be explained more later on. Furthermore, it is my position that this chapter must necessarily manifest to give us any further context to what I, refer to as reality. This literary work is a component of the massive mechanism that is life and experience, and in order for it, experience, to continue or to be, this work must be composed. I maintain that everything that appears to happen does so in some capacity as a necessity to a functioning reality. This thesis implies that ultimately the mind is infinite in every conceivable and inconceivable way. In some capacity, I do not necessarily imply or mean anything beyond the thesis statement, everything is conceptual. But for the purpose of making my contribution to the philosophical arts, I will attempt to expand on and illustrate what I have already stated. Hopefully, this expansion brings clarity and inspiration. When the world knows beauty as beauty, ugliness arises. When it knows good as good, evil arises. Thus, being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy bring about each other. Long and short reveal each other. High and low support each other. Music and voice harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore, the sages manage the work of detached actions, conduct the teaching of no words. Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu. This is the nature of experience and existence. In some contexts, things are what they are, and in other contexts, things are also what they are in appropriation to that particular context. This means that everything is what it is in relationship to something else, or every concept is what it is in relationship to other concepts, ad infinitum. This means that darkness is what it is in relationship to light, the concept of evil is what it is in relationship to good, moral to immoral, full to empty, something to nothing, forever to never, yes to no, child to parent, teacher to student, and so on. Every single concept depends on other concepts to make it so. Thus, everything can be explained. Even the things that are said to be unexplainable are in some capacity explained. To say that something is indescribable is to indeed describe a quality of that thing. We cannot escape this. There is nothing that is not conceptual. Even the things that are material or tangible are ultimately concepts, because something being material as opposed to immaterial is a concept or idea itself. As it is explained in the first sloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is the inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference in quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is a sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore, everything there is absolute. Srimad Bhagavatam, Purport on Canto 1, Chapter 2, 11, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When I say that concepts are what they are in relationship to other concepts, this also goes for concepts that may seem to have no apparent opposites. For example, at this precise moment I cannot think of what might be a definite opposite to the concept of a chair, so I will use the concept of a chair as an example. The chair is what it is in relationship to other concepts, and concepts effectively stem other concepts. To illustrate, the chair is defined by Merriam-Webster as a seat for one person that has a back and usually 4 legs. As I'm sure most would agree, Merriam-Webster provides us with a sound, standard definition of a chair. Here, of course, are a few concepts that relate to and make a chair a chair. It is a seat. This term seat can also be described as it typically relates to having to do with individuals being able to sit down, and so on. Also, the number 1 is a concept as it relates to the other numbers in varying amounts of things. It is not 2, it is not 3, and so on. In addition, the concept of a human being is what it is in relationship to being alive, being and not being non-human. The concept of a back is a concept that is what it is in relationship to the concept of the front. In this case, we are referring to the back of the chair. Essentially, what we are saying is that all concepts maintain themselves in their relationship to other concepts. For example, red is a color, and of colors there is red. Everything or every concept is what it is in relationship to what other concepts are or are not. And ultimately, most concepts are what they are in relationship to the very concept that says that they are what they are and are not something else. Also, concepts are what they are in the relationship to being concepts that can be thought of. This ability to relate concepts to one another is not done by anything other than the mind, which is the producer of thought, the maintainer and originator of all things. God, 2. The human mind is part of the infinite intellect of God. Spinoza, 1677. When we take the term God and replace it with the term concept, but maintain the meaning of infinity that is God, we may quite simply explain the relationship between God and what seems to be God's subjects. We need only say that everything is ultimately an idea, and it will be quite easily implied that God is also an idea. In this sense, everything seems to be equalized under this notion, and the concept of God's nature of being infinite becomes evident, since only the mind is responsible for establishing boundaries, equations, division, and distinction. For the very nature of God is to be infinite. Some refer to this infinite substance as God, while in this particular context I prefer to call it concept. Concepts may differ in name but are ultimately identical in function. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Tao De Jing, Lao Tzu. When explaining that all is essentially a component of one, we may assert through the philosophy that everything is a component of one, is also a concept in itself, This would suggest that all things are ultimately conceptual or of concept. Now, when explaining the philosophy, the question of God can therefore be answered simply. God is. Now, whether God be male or female, a spirit or a force, invisible or visible, etc., are only further limitations in matters in language that restrict the very meaning of God's infinity, but at the same time demonstrate the affinity and flexibility of the concept which is ultimate. This is true because God must be everything and must also not be. God must occupy both contrary realms in order to be God. Otherwise, the concept of God is restricted by rhetoric, and as a result, nonsensical notions arise. To choose some other method in expressing the notion that everything is of one infinite substance, whether it be named God, concept, or something else, is a matter of personal preference. Ultimately, the philosophical matter at hand is still the same. Everything is of one and many. What we decide to call that one substance is, in some contexts, irrelevant. This is because whatever rhetoric we use to describe that substance, the substance still is, and therefore does not ultimately require our rhetoric to define it, especially since language will always on some level succeed in limiting what we at the same time describe as limitless. It is also true that the substance can only depend on us, the mind, to claim it as substance, and therefore everything is totally dependent on the mind for order in experience. It therefore must be concluded that if there be any thinking thing, then that thinking thing is God, because that thinking thing can perceive of the infinite nature of concept and maintains all experience. If the thinking thing denounces their title of God and maintains that God is outside of themselves, then they themselves must admit that they are just a thought or attribute in the mind of the infinite God. But if the thinker thinks any of these things, then that thing is still exercising the power of God as the architect of their own assignment. Thus, in one dimension, mode of experience, God, the individual, embraces their nature, and in another dimension, the individual is resistance against themselves. This is the human and godly condition, and a constant resistance against the power of itself, the power of its own intellect. To understand that everything is a concept is to understand that on some level, everything is its formation and destruction belongs to the concepts that makes things so. These concepts being held by other concepts are all finally products of thought. As thinking things, we can entertain concepts that bring us disdain and pain, or we can entertain the ones that grant us life and pleasure. But ultimately, concepts maintain themselves even if we imagine resistance. It is in our own imagination that experience is maintained and bound forever. The relationship between concepts and the infinity within those concepts all being held up by one another's conception is demonstrated in the relationship of the planets in our solar system that are held together by the gravitational force of the sun. The phenomena of our experience is just as spectacular as the bond between worlds, and our, God's, intellect is mirrored in the cosmos. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, every material manifestation enters into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I again create. The whole cosmic order is under me. By my will, it is manifested again and again, and by my will, it is annihilated at the end. O Dhanajaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached, seated as though neutral. Lord God Krishna, Bhagavad Gita, excerpt from chapter 9. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Synchronizing. Freedom. Every physical environment, every idea, and every mood, mode, or experience is the gateway to another dimension. The synchronist strives to use the power of concept as a tool to help provide and enhance clearer experience. The path of the synchronist is the path of freedom. The path of the synchronist has been made to help the individual break free from the chains that bind them to a particular dimension or mode of thought. To synchronize these modes means to be able to travel among them freely, to have control, power, and choice over the direction of one's own life. To understand means to move within the way of things and free yourself of the burden of futility and action. In all of us, we have created an enemy. In all of us, we have created a problem. If we understand the implications of our circumstance and pay the duties to the false world that we have manufactured, we can find freedom from ourselves. This starts with myself. This starts with you. This starts with us. The individual has been so entrapped in the dimensions of their own mind that they have literally lost the way of civility. We have degraded ourselves in such a way that we behave as savages, that we destroy our own homes and communities. We have lost the way of life, advancement, and flourishment. Now we have adopted a way of destruction. This is one of the primary modes that we occupy. Welcome to this dimension. Welcome to your reality. Welcome to our circumstance. Welcome to my creation. But what do we do to repair our situation? What do we do to gain freedom from ourselves? Well, since we have created such a robust world, we must first accept that this experience is and was our responsibility. We cannot point fingers and blame this person or that person for our situation. Though we can use this language as a tool for self-development on the physical plane, we must understand that ultimately, nothing would be so if the mind did not allow it to be. And once we study and understand the nature of concept, we can understand that our experience is a spectacular phenomena that exists on the mental plane, but transcends that plane at the same time. The planes of experience that, in their totality, operate as one experience are the mind, intellectual, the heart, emotional, and the body, material. These planes will be examined in detail in their respective chapters. By developing in each of these planes of existence without neglecting the responsibilities of each, we can become recalibrated, resynchronized with our experience, and gain a more intuitive, natural, less resistant path to moving as one with what is, instead of developing anxiety about the notions and the inevitable that we are responsible for manufacturing. Let's get started. Let's identify the rules in our mind, and let's break them. Let's defy gravity. During the 100 years of his life, without one being prejudicial to another. Kama Sutra, Vatsyayana. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Synchronizing the Mind. Imagination. The mind is not the brain. The brain is the physical matter that resides inside the skull of the animal. The mind is the space where matter resides. The mind is the open platform of all things. It is the birthplace and origin of all experience. It is the space between matter, and since it is not tangible, it is the void, the nothing. It is the invisible stage. The mind is the projector, but it has no form. It is God. Illusions are established by the mind, but this illusion is not totally useless, for it is through this illusion that the mind can realize other worlds. Through the concept of choice, we can reveal that choices and all other categories of experience are only a matter of the mind. Even experience itself is conceptual. Though it may appear on some level that we have some sort of choice, we understand that this concept of choice and what is referred to as actual, material experience are all maintained by categories, which are all indeed mental and are not material. All these categories seem to maintain themselves almost spontaneously, which is why we must explore the concepts within ourselves that grant us vitality, strength, and insight. First, the individual must exercise the intellect. We must identify and take responsibility that our current circumstance is a result of our own thinking and perception, And through changing the way we think about concepts, we will indeed and obviously change our reality. We must exercise the power of imagination. Once we take responsibility that our current position is of our thinking and is merely a concept, then we should be able to imagine a better world, a better way, an alternative experience. By doing so, by exercising the imagination, you are literally entertaining concepts that you choose. You are painting the mental picture that you want to paint. And though it seems to be a conscious choice on some level, it is as spectacular as the phenomena in nature that keeps our worlds intact. It is amazing power. The same amazing power that keeps the worlds in order, that keeps the cosmos to operate the way it does inside of you. It starts with the desire to take responsibility and then imagine an alternative. By using imagination, you are taking even more responsibility to change the modes and moods of thinking. Imagination is the most radical and useful form of protest and freedom, yet it is the most powerful method of self-captivity. The individual dimension. On some level, the individual dimension, we often become quite concerned with the concept of choices, what choices we have, what choices we can make, etc. We, on some level, directly create concepts. Here's an illustration of this. Two options on the individual level can be represented as A or B. We can understand that A, B, and or are all concepts of the mind essentially and don't necessarily exist materially, but may act as representations of objects or circumstances in the material experience. In this dimension, we forget in some capacity that these concepts are directly of the mind because we've, in the concept of the particular concept, have ideologically separated it from the conception of being conceptual. We even entertain experience as if choice A and choice B are what they are, absent of relationships to anything beyond the concept of itself. We apply superficial qualities on concepts that imply that subjects and material itself can somehow be separated from our impressions on them. This is paradoxical and contradictory. If anything is to be perceived materially or otherwise, it is a subsidiary to concept and is simultaneously a concept itself. In no way is it separate from matters of the mind, even if we superficially impose such qualities. This absolutely includes and applies to the concept of concept itself. To illustrate another example, let us imagine that we found a book that contained the necessary information on how to live a healthy life. And because of the book's size, we compartmentalize this book into sections, each section effectively creating its own separate book. Once we move on from one book to read another, we forget about some of what was in the book we were just reading before. Also, as we approach each book, if even for just a moment, in some capacity we forget that all of the books are actually components of one whole, even though through our efforts to compartmentalize we create the illusion that there are in some capacity separate. It is in this moment of forgetfulness that we stray away from the seemingly more intuitive natural way of engaging experience. This illustration is metaphor for the consequences for compartmentalizing ideas, and it's primarily because of this compartmentalization that our minds seem to become blurred. Choice is the very essence of compartmentalization, and for this reason, the very first thing suggested in my previous book is to reconsider, because it is only through our imagination that we can consider our existence, realize, and free ourselves from the self-inflicted imprisonment held by concept, particularly the concept of choice and other categories. Realizing is the result of using concepts to obliterate and or manifest new concepts. This is the realization of the synchronist, in the felt, practicing the way of destruction through creation. The mind, fractured. These compartments we created in our experience are mental constructions and therefore self-manifested. We've become extremely attached to these concepts and their compartments. For example, we recognize ourselves as belonging to a particular racial group, gender, political group, competitive team, native of a particular land, a part of a social class. We categorize species of life, and so on. Consequently, we tend to live our lives by these ideas. We govern our lives by compartments, and these compartments are concepts used to explain our experience. When we think of a concept that we can use to explain our experience, it is understood that we, if even for a moment, think solely of the concept and thus forget about the collective universal whole of everything in our experience. It is understood that this is further perpetuated in our education. When we are born into this world, we are not really given the opportunity to feel and experience life before being indoctrinated. Almost immediately, it seems we are told that this is mom, this is dad, and so on. We are conditioned to think of things in a compartmentalized fashion. Furthermore, we go to school and are taught even more about the way things are, have been, and will be. But we have very little time to feel and develop our own understanding of experience as it is. This relationship to the world is very different than how other animals relate to it. Other animals do not have to categorize or over-contemplate. They merely perform on the stage of life as they are, under the conditions their karma has granted them. Other animals are, in their natural habitat, in sync. We, in taking birth, seem to become separated from our intuitive nature. We become more concerned with thinking of concepts and entertaining the illusion of choice. This may point to the usefulness of death. In death, the soul is disconnected. It escapes our body to realize totally or temporarily return to the universal collective. Thus, our soul, or life force, also becomes detached from the illusion of the body manifested through the mind and the senses. When we take the human form, our souls are in the containment of flesh, and we forget about the relationship to the divine and formless. This is why, as our bodies gain in wisdom and experience, we are more likely equipped in remembering our eternal relationship to the universal whole. As we age, we come closer to our eternal formlessness. We have the ability to use ideas and concepts to bring us to the realization that these are just concepts, that we manifest the illusion of choice, and that there is no I, but only a felt experience. We at times may find ourselves entertaining a compartment instead of feeling the experience as whole. To illustrate what I mean, we may watch a film and become so infatuated with the character in the film and the relationship with the plot of the story that we spend less and often no effort and consideration for the other characters, the actors that play them, the other possible thematic elements of the film, the non-actors who may have worked on the film, the impact of the film on our experience and the experience of others, as well as the consequences of experiencing the film, and so on. This illustration is used to point out some of the other aspects of experience that are actually compartmentalized so that they can be explained. But if these concepts are not explained, are not compartmentalized, and only felt, we could feel and experience all of the notions expressed by all of the concepts as one. We may feel the film instead of criticize it and compare. This felt experience would give us what we sometimes call mental clarity, and intuition through the feeling of blissfulness can be described as being synchronized. Intuitive action, absent of over-contemplation, is one of the goals of the synchronists. We can use our manifested illusion of choice to later reject the very same illusion, thus bringing us to our knees towards the light of realization. We can also use the illusion of choice as a tool for comfort, to seemingly numb the pain we may experience. It is understood that if we use our imagination to establish illusion only for temporary comfort, if we do not use it as a tool for the deconstruction of our realities that make us ill, we will continue to suffer. If we fall to our illusion of choice and concept, we shall reshape, reconsider that very same illusion, and through concept shake ourselves from the self-inflicted bondage of compartmentalization and come towards the realization of the universal collective. At that time, we will finally understand that detaching ourselves from the boundaries we've created on this dimensional plane are our only option. We encourage a path of liberating ourselves from obsession and all capacities to come to understanding in its fullness and finality. On this humble journey of this understanding, we seemingly will do exactly what we should when the situation presents itself. The ego. The ego is the sense of self. The ego is the notion of the individual. It is the very concept of I. The ego is the notion that further establishes the compartments of reality and fuels the cycle of action and reaction onward. The ego is, in fact, what we often refer to as the individual experience. If it were not for the ego or the sense of self, then what we identify as the human being could not separate itself from all that was and is, and therefore could not define itself. For all that is would simply be, for the individual cannot exist without its own ego. As been established in previous chapters, what is referred to as the mind or thought has the infinite capability to redefine exactly what it is experiencing. All things identified can only be identified through the powers of mental construction or through sensation. It should then be obvious that things without minds do not identify themselves. The mind itself is and sets parameters upon its reality, and therefore is greatly responsible for the trajectory of what we identify as the experience of the individual. Thankfully, the mind is infinite in creative power. Through meditation, the mind can reject all notions of the self by not consciously thinking of the self. Instead, the subconscious mind can focus upon the body's natural and basic inclinations to maintain life. By maintaining the breath and other bodily functions that do not take direct conscious effort, it can be simply understood that normal breathing would not typically take any conscious effort, but for one to consciously point the agitated mind towards the blissful sensation of inhaling and exhaling, the mind can more easily detach from the notions of ego and the self because it is not focused on such notions. This must be practiced by the mind in order to receive total and more meaningful levels of understanding. The ego gives birth to itself. The very concept of the ego is proof of its very existence. If there was no ego or ideological separateness from the whole, or what is, then there would indeed be no discussion of it. The fact that we can discuss the concept of the ego, the individual, or separateness is proof of the supreme intellect, mind, at work. The ego, the sense of individuality, or the sense of self causes many problems. And in the same instance, it causes no problems. And in other instances, ego does not cause at all. This matter will be subject to how the mind decides to address the human conditions in that moment. It is common in this age for many to refer to the ego as a negative thing that the individual must try to rid themselves of. Among religious institutions and discourse of the philosophical variety, it is common to hear human beings suggest a notion to move beyond their ego. This pursuit of shedding the ego is primarily nonsensical, for as soon as the individual attempts to free themselves of ego, they at that moment strengthen the ego. It is in fact one of the most egotistical things to imply that they themselves can shed their ego and or transcend beyond it. First, they are actually utilizing the ego to explain how they'll transcend it. This way of thinking is in no way transcendence of ego, but is a further strengthening of it through its reconditioning. It is being utilized as a tool to feed a fantasy. Secondly, one of the primary uses and goals of the ego is to establish itself through the concept of the individual. The very purpose of the ego is to identify and recognize itself. Once this is done, the ego has succeeded. The ego will go when the individual goes, and at no other moment. The ego grows stronger with every single thought pertaining to it. Chapter 5. Synchronizing. The Heart. Faith. Emotions are not necessarily obedient to the laws of the physical world, but they are obedient to the laws of integrities, to honesties, to constructive and creative uses. The mind and the emotions must be used and not abused, or they contribute to the destruction of the whole structure. You cannot have a healthy body if the mind is sick. You cannot have a healthy mind if the emotions are sick. Health is a kind of completeness. Manly P. Hall. We as individuals must not only develop and train the intellect, but we must also tend to matters of the heart, emotional well-being. Despite the intellectual power of the individual, if the emotions of oneself are not kept in compassionate consideration, the decay of the intellect will soon follow. The heart must be strengthened, and there must be a strong bond between the mind and the heart. The heart will keep the mind focused on the right concepts by giving love, while the mind will please the heart by thinking of concepts that give life. The human being, with love in their heart, can respond intuitively to the environment that they are in. Faith is truly the heart of life itself, because without faith in your safety or in your destiny, it will be a constant fight against yourself. By nature, you are on the right path. You are experiencing what should be experienced. This does not mean that you should experience this one particular feeling forever, nor does it mean that you should neglect shifting your circumstance. But if you do not have faith in yourself and faith in the situation, if you do not have faith that you will pull through, that you will get better, that your wounds will heal, and that you will be wiser, then your life will forever be an episode of anxiety. Love yourself, love others, forgive yourself, forgive others, believe in your ideas, believe in your imagination, walk out on faith. Having faith to maintain matters of the heart also means being true to yourself. You have to be honest. You have to be honest about the things that make you feel vulnerable, insecure, or scared. You have to learn what those things are so that you can let them go and consider all the beauty that is life. Your mood and emotional well-being is so dependent on how you think, but also how you directly associate with your world. Music, film, food, nature, conversation, all the things that the senses enjoy is translated into data that affects your mood and emotional taste. This is why feeling emotionally stable is not an endeavor of just one particular plane of experience. It is the involvement and inclusion of all planes of experience: mind, heart, body. Feeling emotionally good is not only a matter of the heart, but it is also a matter of the mind and the body as well. But first, before our journey onward to feeding the soul, we must have faith. We must believe that this is going to work, that this is going to be okay, that love is what you truly want, that love feels better. Fear is the weakness within us. We become fearful of our fears. This makes life seem as though we are more weak than we are strong, but this is not the case. Through every trial, every experience, every obstacle you face, every moment that we have ever felt down or defeated, the strength within us has been growing to new heights. Even if you've ever felt humiliated, betrayed, helpless, confused, alone, something inside of you even stronger is being forged. That love within you, the power of faith has been building up. Deep down, you feel stronger, but you do not know yet how to access this strength. This strength is backed and powered by love. Fear is merely the mind's attempt at concealing the power within you. It's to diminish your faith and your efforts to focus on love. It is the mind that colors the personality, gives its tone and character. If we cultivate willpower, decision, positive instead of negative thinking, we cannot help making an impression of masterfulness. And everybody knows that this is the qualification that does things. It is masterfulness, force, that achieves results. And if we do not express it in our appearance, people will not have the confidence in our achieving ability. They may think that we can sell goods behind the counter, work under orders, carry out some mechanical routine with faithfulness and precision, but they will not think we are fitted for leadership, that we can command resources to meet with possible crises or big emergencies. Never say or do anything which will show the earmarks of a weakling, of a nobody, of a failure. Never permit yourself to assume a poverty-stricken attitude. Never show the world a gloomy, pessimistic face, which is an admission that life has been a disappointment to you, instead of a glorious triumph. Never admit by your speech, your appearance, your gait, your manner, that there's anything wrong with you. Hold up your head. Walk erect. Look everybody in the face. No matter how poor you may be, or how shabby your clothes, whether you are jobless, homeless, friendless even, show the world that you respect yourself, that you believe in yourself, and that no matter how hard the way, you are marching on to victory. Show by your expression that you can think and plan for yourself, that you have a forceful mentality. The victorious, triumphant attitude will put you in command of resources, which a timid, self-depreciating failure attitude will drive you from. The victorious attitude, Orison Swett Marden, 1916. Human beings are bound to different constitutional positions based on the bodies that we occupy, the locations and conditions in which we manifest. We appear to be mere subjects under the authoritative push and pull distributed by the laws of the universe. The laws of the universe are beyond any material forms. The laws are the very essence of the reality of the dimension we occupy. The original seed or cause of all effects is law. The law has set the stage for everything that has happened and everything that will happen. The law essentially allows the organism to live or die within cosmic order. Some may also know the name of the law as God. The law is the original cause of all things, and though we may give the original cause the title of God, it must be also understood that this law is, in fact, God, and God herself is infinite in name indeed. The law is ultimate over all other forms and forces, no matter our plans in our conscious mind. The law transcends all matter and allows or disallows based on the true desires of itself and the subconscious mind. What the law desires and allows is, at our most fundamental level, who we are as individuals. We cannot escape this. Though we like to confess contrary concepts from our mouths and entertain our immediate thoughts of the conscious mind, these notions merely stem from the ego. They stem from the self. All human beings, at their core, have at least some desire for their particular circumstances, constitutional position, and current reality. The reality that is your life is a mental construction and concoction, a melange of infinite relating concepts bound together by the notions of something and the nothing. It is of the utmost importance to the human being to have faith in the law and to expect that they have its mercy. Mercy from the law helps ensure the pleasantness of the human experience and helps guarantee the safety and life of the human being overall. Even if one appears to not be given mercy from law and therefore receives great misfortune or death, if he is unable to preserve the realms for survival, it is still necessary to have total unflinching faith in the law for as long as we are conscious. If the human being does not have faith, it will be tremendously more difficult to survive and flourish. One must believe that they have automatically been given mercy from law. Even when things are not going as planned, the human being must have faith that the law will help them secure the other realms of survival. This is something that must be done. If one is always unsure about their blessings or is not confident that their condition is indeed one that is in accordance with the nature of the universe, it will be even more difficult to survive and flourish, and thus more difficult to perform optimally. One must believe totally that their life is an essential component to the universe and that their nature operates in a symbiotic relationship with the nature of everything that is. The human being should realize that they are the law and the law is also in them. This is the ultimate way of the synchronist. It should be here mentioned that the human being should not assume that the law has granted them mercy, merely to amplify the ego. If a man or woman believes that the law is only useful in making one popular, wealthy, or is to establish some fulfillment grounded in a concept of oneself that isn't necessary to establishing balance and synchronized experience, is practicing an unhealthy obsession. The law is optimized once we establish all realms of our health, that is, the heart, the mind, and the body. When these three things are established, exercised, and recognized in fullness, the life experience for the individual becomes profoundly more clear. These three realms have been outlined here to show that anything that is prioritized beyond synchronizing is excessive and a distraction from the most essential components to living a life of better understanding, clarity of mind, optimization of opportunities, self-realization, and overall pleasantness. The human being should start to progress in their faith in the law and receive and recognize its mercy. If you are reading this book right now, you are receiving its mercy on many different levels. Focus on what good things in life you are experiencing and recognize how those things or experiences are in relationship to bettering or securing aspects of your health or well-being. For example, do you have any friends, family, or people that you communicate with that help you express yourself and feel better emotionally? If so, that is the law being merciful to you. Do you have any books that you enjoy reading? Do you like to write? Are there any films that you enjoy that seem to stimulate your intellect? Do you have any wise people in your life? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then it is clear that you have opportunities to grow the mind. You have a brain that actually enjoys learning. This is something to celebrate and recognize within the heart. Furthermore, being human, this in itself is quite spectacular. If you look at this in the consideration that you could have taken the form of a tree, a dog, or a hog, or maybe even a rock, we can see the human experience is, on many levels, one to be appreciated. We should recognize and be thankful for every day that we are not conquered physically by illness, have functioning limbs, feel youthful, or experience any pleasantness through the five senses: sight, smell, touch, or sound. These are all things that human beings may forget to recognize. Often the human being fails to appreciate how their body can help them achieve pleasantness within the other realms. If only they recognize all of their blessings and the mercy that they receive on a daily basis, they could better optimize their survival and access their superhuman abilities. Lastly, any resources that you have, whether it be food, money, clothing, or shelter, should also be appreciated and recognized. These are all resources that can be utilized in some form. Recognize what of your resources are useful to you securing your physical, mental, and emotional health. You will, as a result, better realize excess and remove any resources that may be in the way of your further realizing optimal survival, to consistently be in touch and do your very best to prosper. These realms are not necessary to be known by name explicitly in order to perform at one's optimal level or self-realized. This framework merely operates as a guide to cut through distractions of life and misinformed, misguided people that attempt to lead man and woman down a path of obsession, confusion, and exploitation. This chapter is designed to clearly map out what is most important, and that is the road to survival and flourishing through understanding. One should have total faith that they are able to improve and are worthy of a more in tune way of life. Without this, the journey for bettering one's life becomes unnecessarily difficult, anxiety ridden, bitter, and primarily unpleasant. I have found that meditation has a profound effect on helping with maintaining emotional stability. Oftentimes, we are often overstimulated and overworked. If we can find a comfortable, quiet space to sit silently and think only of breathing, we will be effectively ejecting ourselves from many harmful and detrimental situations. To have the ability or resources to meditate is a huge blessing in life that should not be taken for granted. I recommend that every human being should participate in some sort of meditation. Practicing in action is essential. We often want to resolve perceived issues in our lives by constantly performing some sort of direct action. Sometimes we like to think so intensely about how we can resolve these issues. It is true that we sometimes cannot see the light until we close our eyes and give up trying to see. Indeed, meditation, closed eyes, can help the human being finally see. Life is like a movie in which we are all actors playing certain roles, but playing our roles in this film called life can be extremely exhausting. Meditation is a practice that helps us transcend our traditional roles. Through meditations, we become some other element that is often overshadowed by the cast in the film. Through meditation, we become the heartbeat, the lungs, and the air that we breathe. Through meditation, we become the blood rushing through our veins, the atoms that maintain our physical existence. These other elements do not consciously think about doing what they do. These elements are under direct law of the universe to perform in the ways that they do automatically. The blood does not think about how to circulate throughout the body, it just does. The wind does not have to think about how to carry itself across land, it simply does. In addition, we also perform automatically things like breathing, digesting, and distributing food for energy without the need of conscious effort. Though we have the ability to operate automatically in many ways, we often let our minds outstress our capacity for survival. Through meditation, we give up the ability to overthink and overstimulate our conscious minds and instead take a break from our exhausting roles as human beings. We allow the natural, automatic functions like breathing take priority over all functions which can further stress our minds and our ability to survive and to love. Even when our fellow man is down in the dumps and is showing their wickedness, we must have some level of compassion for them. We should not be petty towards them in any way. Either we destroy them or let them be. We must not lose sight of this. Human beings often do not consciously choose to play the roles they are conditioned from birth to play. They are, in general, very ignorant about the world and the matters concerning their own existence. They are stifled creatively and are lacking in the abilities and opportunities to express themselves and communicate freely. Oftentimes, they are bound by social norms, political correctness, and petrifying fear of what others might think of them. Most never acquire the skills to do for self, and in many cases, the human being has given up any sense of independent or critical thinking and is merely a vessel to be manipulated. With a mentality so weak, they appear to have lost all ability to think for themselves. These types are a profound sadness, and for them, all else has been long lost. There may be a glimpse of their humanity underneath all of their despair, but it is often best to not dive into their misery to search for it. Though all of this may be true, on balance we must learn to love the lost and be kind toward them. Showing frustration towards them will only make us look weak to the lost, who in actuality are looking for and desire your strong leadership. Further, human beings have created a tradition of living unsatisfying, frustrating lives only to beg at the feet of someone more financially fortunate than them. We as a human race do not know how to be the boss of our own works, and we do not know how to be leaders of even our own families. When we consider all of this and take into account that these unfortunate souls are also being exploited by others, is it any wonder that we should feel sorry for them? Our hearts should go out to all the human beings because to live is to face suffering, no matter the constitutional position. We should never be in a constant state of unhappiness or grief. The only time we should use our anger is in the technical. If we are trying to get a certain goal or particular reaction, we can use negative emotions in a productive way. The productive action will always attempt to maximize one's ability for survival. For example, Being overly aggressive, causing physical or mental harm to another person are things that typically should not be exercised by the individual. But these actions should not be disregarded entirely because these aggressive methods may be useful in order to advance the civilization or secure aspects of health and survival. Overall, the human being should not be in a constant state of goodness. This means that even when human beings are negative towards the individual, more often than not, the person on the receiving end should react peacefully, blissfully, and in a diplomatic fashion. The synchronist should focus on distributing love to the people, and since some people fear love, fear will naturally manifest in some as well. In addition, the human being should have a positive outlook on oneself. They should constantly use the opportunity to see negative situations and transform them into opportunities where the individual can smile and even extract laughter when appropriate. It is also many ways necessary to be in total love with oneself. This means that a person should be able to enjoy deep satisfaction from spending time by oneself. When one can master and gain experience in the area of isolation, he will increase in self appreciation and, by better understanding oneself, will gain the ability to better understand others. One should find work in solitude and loneliness. If properly achieved, a higher state of appreciation for those around them will follow. It is very difficult for one to have a stimulating, exciting, or healthy social life if one does not have total and complete love for oneself or cannot embrace some extended periods of isolation and silence. Socializing. Socializing as well as isolation is also very important. It is best to utilize opportunities to socialize to humbly gain an understanding about other human beings and how they feel about the world. Do not get bitter when you encounter one with shallow understanding. An alternative, see every conversation and interaction as a learning experience. When appropriate, express yourself to the other in order to gain a level of mutual understanding and feelings of trust. Do not dominate the conversation when it is not your time, especially when conversations are intimate and one on one. Opportunities to socialize should typically not be focused on you expressing your thoughts, but should be you asking questions to get the other person to express their thoughts. When appropriate, you can express your feelings. This is to make the person who is expressing their feelings to you feel comfortable with revealing more. In conversation and in social life, people usually want to give and receive. Communication and socializing is the art of exchange. More specifically, the art of expression is the act of giving. Good people do not want to be the only ones expressing themselves, for a good person expressing themselves would feel emotionally drained, empty, and exhausted. A good person would not only want to give, but would also want to receive expressions from others. This refuels the tank of emotional stability. Through the balanced social exchange of giving and receiving, the human being is granted the ability and energy to learn. Through their new heightened awareness and perspective, they will be able to further distribute their own expressions, stimulating the heart realm of the world. Converse to understand, not to respond. The heart, fractured. In actuality, the mind is not the actor in the human experience, the heart is. The mind may have a technical, imaginative, and seemingly clear understanding for the sciences and mechanisms of the universe. But if the human being is not emotionally well and healed, feelings of despair will not vanish. This is because the matters that regard feelings are responsibilities of the heart and cannot be solved solely by intellectual exercise. The mind is God. The heart is the human being. It is the spirit of woman. Often, the average human being in an industrialized society is of two types: either emotional with no intellectual basis for understanding, or the human being has some intellectual and technical knowledge with zero intuitive or emotional inclinations. These two types of persons are both of the extremely vulnerable and emotionally distraught variety, yet they make up the majority of today's population. There is often no balance, no harmony, no synchronization, only imbalance and mishap are the modes of many today. If one is over emotional with no intellectual basis, then this person can be regarded as a fool. They are someone who performs or avoids actions based off of fear. They operate as a sort of basic animal that has no knowledge of the world that they live. What even worse, because of their lack of intelligence, desires to move towards pleasures and away from pains, yet is not skilled or equipped to do so efficiently. The current cultures of the world have been designed in such a way that a vast majority of the pleasures are designed to weaken the heart, the mind, and the body, and so the uneducated, illiterate fool always does a poor job at navigating themselves to salvation in such a destructive society. On the other hand, the one who appears to be dominated by some technical knowledge is a fool of a different, more cowardly sort. These types believe that they are informed or enlightened because they have graduated from some university. And since these types have a degree from some institution and blindly follow the mass media described as news, they feel good that they can go to frivolous parties and hold discussions about nonsense in order to avoid discussing real issues that plague their existence. These sorts are very fearful of confronting their emotions, the damage and the trauma they experienced as a youth. The so-called informed public is actually more fearful of reliving their pain so that they make no efforts to be emotional. They tuck away their capacity to feel human. They take so much caffeine and other intoxicants so they may stay forever numb and heartless to the wickedness that they may help perpetuate all over the globe. These are the best workers. The ones who have convinced themselves that it is better to be a bully to others than to live as leader are the most submissive. They are the ones who always aim to please. Their sense of self has been eroded to the point where they are no longer human, but humanoid. These types are the greatest machines man has made. Fractured. Chapter 6. Synchronizing the Body. Action and Survival. The synchronist understands the notions of the self and the particular objects are matters of the mind first. The synchronist understands that with this understanding, moments call for redefining existence and a method that is suitable for gaining further understanding in the world and of the self. Without imagination and the ability to redefine experience, the human being will live the experience of someone else. Without imagination, the individual fails to take the position as God. In this chapter, the body is defined as the physical world. For the synchronist, the body is an extension of the everything in the physical world, and the physical world is an extension of the body. These two concepts are of one big material existence. The body is of the tangible world, and therefore will be discussed in relationship with everything that is physical. This is the only of the three realms of experience that deals directly with material objects. Action. To survive and to die are the ultimate goals of the human experience. There is nothing desired more than these two seemingly polarizing ideas. The human being in all cases, above all else, desires to live and or die. There may be other desires in addition to these, but the lusts for these two things are by far the strongest of all. Either the human being wants to continue on, and or they no longer want to continue on. This is hardwired into the mind, an animal mind. There is an inseparable relationship between two notions. One, completion. Two, incompletion. On balance, the human being has an inclination towards maintaining survival, to continue experience and not yet reach the completed state. But often at the same time, the human being naturally has somewhat of a fascination with eventually experiencing death, to cease to continue and reach the completed state. All actions are performed in expectation of a perceived reaction or response. As long as the human being perceives and experiences, the human being is acting in some way and therefore expecting some sort of response. This back and forth relationship between experience and expectation is inseparable and binding. The notion of completion and incompletion is essential to the human experience. The human being desires to live, but at the same time, primarily because of the unpleasantness of suffering, fantasizes about being finally finished. Conceptually, the human being imagines in some aspect to not be bound to the laws of necessity, action, and reaction. This realm that is not bound to action or reaction, experience or expectation can be otherwise conceptualized as death, for the life they lust for is not the life they currently occupy. Even in cases where human beings believe in the afterlife, death is still often used conceptually to signify the end of some aspect of experience. These desires, completion and incompletion, are inherent to the nature of the human being. Confusion must be a part of the human being's existence in this age. Humans fantasize equally over life and death. The human being has a natural desire to live, and to live is to experience some sort of pain or suffering at some time. Still, the human being also does not want to experience pain or suffering. This is not possible for the human being under current conditions. This leads to further frustration and anxiety. To live is to suffer in some form. Human beings can perform actions but can never experience its state of completion. To finally be finished, there must be no experience. As long as there is experience, there will be reaction. And as long as there is action and experience, there will be a response. This cycle is contrary to the illusionary concept desired by humans identified as a state of total completion. As long as one is engaged in action, they are also facing incompletion. And as long as beings take action, there can never be completion. Being totally finished is never a matter of taking action, but being unable to ever act or experience in any form. It is this notion of being unable to experience, reaching the state of completion, that is in direct contradiction to being able to experience performing an action, perpetual incompletion. The human being performs actions with the expectation to complete them, but as long as they're in action or experience, there is a reaction to experience. Thus, completion is illusionary and fantasy. Experience is a constant transference of energies and moods. This experience we call life can be illustrated with the example of a pendulum. When the weighted ball suspended in air by a cord is released, the weight swings back and forth on its own. Similarly, when we perform actions, even if the action is only experiencing, we are commanding a chain reaction. We sometimes like to imagine, if I just do this, then I will be done. But in actuality, you will never be finished as long as there is an experience, because as soon as you perform an action or bear witness through experience, your expectations keep it suspended, causing the pendulum to swing back and forth forever. We can never experience an actual state of completion, and therefore we daydream, and our art entertains what it would be like to die or to be free from the bonds of action and reaction. Fantasy and imagination is ideologically the temporary escape for the burdens of the human condition. What if we could die? What if we could be done? What if we could leave? What if we could feel no more? If one performs an act of suicide, a state of ultimate and total completion is still not reached. If one takes action, it may appear that an action or task has been completed, but this is not the case. As long as there is any experience, there is still some sort of action, and if there is still action being performed, then reaching completion will forever be an impossibility. Furthermore, one cannot ever know when they have reached this state of completion, because to know is to experience, and to experience is to be in constant state of action. The human being wants to be finally finished, to be done forever. But of course the human being has a burning contrary desire for life. This keeps the human being bound in a never-ending push and pull between pleasure and pain. We will always receive what we truly desire. We will receive not what we speak, but what is truly in our hearts. Survival. We should all be clear in understanding that a human being's readiness for survival and prosperity can usually be best maintained through prioritizing the development of the body, the mind, and the heart. I would define survival as the state of living that results in a continual flourish and growth to more efficiently protect life. In this text, survival doesn't mean to merely continue living, but will be more closely in alignment with that of prosperity. It is possible to barely live, but many of us are not interested in barely living. Many of us want to live and live well. We want to live in fullness, and in order to live well and in fullness, we must expand our idea of what it means to survive. It is not enough to have food, water, and shelter. Those things are merely a small component in the physical realm. More importantly, food, water, and shelter alone fails to take into account what it means to survive and prosper. What if you run out of food, water, and shelter? Your streak for survival may end abruptly. What if your food, water, and shelter are of low quality or contaminated? Under these circumstances, what you assume will keep you alive may actually be the death of you. What if you do not have knowledge of how to maintain or manage your food source, water, or shelter? What if you cannot defend your food, water, and shelter from invaders? All physical objects are in some form perishable, even the human body. There are prerequisites in the area of knowledge and overall health that must be achieved in addition to gaining resources. If we do not broaden and deconstruct our idea of what it means to survive, then we will live forever in disappointment and squalor. If we only think of survival as to get by, we will be constantly staring at our wretchedness and weakness. To survive is to prosper. To survive means to live and embrace our shining glory. The human being should, if necessary, expand their resources in such a way that they are not only living, but they are surviving and experiencing growth and flourishment as well. Prosperity aids in survival and in many ways will make the actual process of survival more enjoyable. Before we go further in the realm of resources, I would like to acknowledge that these realms, when harnessed for true survival, are often inseparable. When the mind is at optimal health, it is thinking clearly. The body must not be in any significant turmoil and must be in an adequate position for performance. The key here is this: when the body is performing well, the mind performs well, and the mind and body perform optimally because of their willingness to perform in acceptance through a guidance under the heart, emotional stability slash fulfillment. I would not give specific dietary suggestions here, nor will I go into detail about the types of yoga, exercise, or actions that one should perform. In later works, I may go into specifics about what works for my own health and provide specific dietary plans. I can only emphasize that you should recognize the importance of these ideas and understand these realms should be in sync in order to maintain survival, prosperity. Just the mere understanding of this may help you overcome self-manifested obstacles. It will only indefinitely aid you in becoming better at solving problems. To continue, the mind can be maintained through mental exercise like reading and writing. The body can be maintained through physical exercise and yoga. The heart can be maintained through meditation and compassionate communication with others. All resources under the domain of the human being may be food that gives one the energy and nutrients to exercise and socialize. It may be also the shelter in which one may practice writing and reading during the cold, ruthless winters. It may even be the money used to purchase literature, clothes acquired for social events and ceremonies, and even livestock are all things which are resources to aid some realm of survival. These resources are of all things that the human being and body utilize to help secure its own survival. We must look at our bodies and resources within the physical world as tools to help us achieve what we truly desire. Every single physical object can, in some way, be a tool to improve one of the three aspects of the human experience. The body. Fracture. The individual is a threat to the physical world. The individual does not see themselves as one with all experience. It sees itself as a separate entity. The body does not act as though everything in their experience is a part of their health and well-being. It reacts towards the physical world in a very grotesque way to directly please or stimulate one narrow part of existence. It does not intend to stretch its arms outwards and embrace all that they are. The individual claims only a small fraction that seems convenient for them and thus takes on roles, none of them being greater than the truth. The body must be identified differently by the mind. As long as there is an obsession with that of the individual, health would not be optimized nor realized. God must be the only one that exists. Chapter 7. God. 4. Without boundaries. The human being, if self-realized, can be God and can be like God. If the human being models themselves after God and studies the characteristics and nature of God, they can move closer to godliness. If one surrounds themselves with those who are self-realized and pursues their studies humbly, with an open mind, and seeks to become a student of the ancient teachings of the world, they may rise above the mind state of their current human form. This is the most beneficial state of being to occupy, because at this stage, God realizes the truth of their circumstances that may not be favorable to the experience of the human being, and also understands that this is brought about by God's own will, which is an infinite expansion of mind. God is therefore not disturbed by the performance of devils that try so hard to prolong their own existence through corruption and greed. That is in the devil's nature. God understands and accepts the nature of things. Devils do evil deeds. Gods move towards goodness and does righteous deeds. Gods act in the way of the truth. Devils do not care for the truth and would much rather consume and live in filth. Devils prefer to become fat from lies and find pleasure in playing with the potential death of others, themselves, and the world in general. This is the nature of the devil. God, on the other hand, is detached from the wickedness that the devil performs, and is not surprised when the devil tries to murder, cheat, kill, and steal. This godly understanding therefore reveals that there is no reforming the devil and his devilment. The devil must be destroyed in that part of the earth where peace is desired. Otherwise, as long as the devil continues, he will continue to do what is natural for him, just as it is natural for a tree to go under the proper conditions. God is beyond bewilderment of perishing human beings and other living things. God is beyond frivolous activities and understands that even God herself is beyond any titles. God is beyond the concern for that of petty human beings that fight one another and indulge in ignorance and fearfulness. God understands that all notions and their opposites are all in within. God is in sync. God is beyond fear. God is beyond notions of life or death. God is eternal. God is immortal. God is ultimate. God is perfect. God is the truth. God is beyond words. God is all. God is. Chapter 8. The process of desynchronization. Illusion by the material energy. People are so engrossed in subject matter for sense gratification that they have very little time to understand the question of self-understanding, even though it is a fact that without the self-understanding, all activity result in the ultimate defeat and the struggle for existence. Perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. Bhagavad Gita, as it is, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There are hidden motives and hidden people. There's hidden languages and hidden history. These things are, for the most part, available for discovery. Thanks to the internet and other advancements in technology, it is easier than ever to locate seemingly hidden information. In reality, this information is not actually hidden. Simply, this so-called hidden truth is just not often publicized through the popular channels, and thus is not highly circulated as other often frivolous things in the storm of mainstream information and art. The mainstream of information is so popular due to wealthy institutions financing specific information to the doorstep of the human being in order to execute a variety of particular political agendas. These agendas are crafted by these institutions in order to hijack the minds of the populace in order to fill the human mind with an excess of nonsensical and linguistic data. This data acts as a parasite. The mind, body, and the senses are then numbed through the overstimulation of a sick technology designed to do exactly that. The human being in general is so distracted away from truth and its nature. The human mind has become more and more degraded as time progresses due to a constant bombardment of force-fed hypnotic propaganda used to stifle any chance of maximizing the use of resources, the mind or body. This brainwashing of the human being is done to transform the being's energy into a battery source that is used to power the mechanism that is the societal entrapment or imprisonment of human potentiality. This potential is an energy that is harvested in the exchange for seemingly absolute power, influence, and protection for otherwise weak, wealthy, and decrepit minority. If this information that is based in truth is honestly sought out, it will absolutely be found. If this information is meditated on with a strong enough heart, they will successfully defeat any and all possibility of becoming a fanatic, for the self is the greatest enemy of the human being as well as the greatest ally. Do not be a fool. The human beings that occupy this planet have studied the science of sense and stimulation so carefully that through the senses the mind can be handicapped through the process of retardation. Overstimulation, misinformation, and intoxication in excessive quantities cannot be properly digested by the mind or body. These strategies are utilized to cripple the human being so that their potential energy can be harvested. These institutions have crafted a method of distributing the arts, media, and creation in such a way that what is consumed through the senses is nothing more than a hypnotic that initiates a drug-like trance-like effect on the people who are subject to it. Wake up, brothers and sisters. Can't you hear? Can you see? The human family is being scammed out of realizing their truth and their full potential. Brothers and sisters, wake up. There is a scam disguised as an equal exchange of goods and services. This is merely an illusion to further rob the people of their energy, the most valuable resource in the universe. Our food, water, and way of life is indeed killing us. The way we think is killing us. Yet and still we are bombarded by notions of happiness through the act of consumption. All the while, we have no true knowledge of our history, our present position, or our future. We are trapped in a mechanism that perpetuates a diabolical process of murder for the profit of others, the murder of oneself and the murder of one another. Wake up. Pseudo-culture. This is schematica, even language, logos, the communication of any and all things in nature depends upon this principle. Pete Peterson, in his work Cymatics, The Science of the Future, stated that nature shows examples of cymatica in everything. This phenomena is found to be one of the prime forces that moves biological evolution along its path. Dan Winter reproduced an experiment to prove that ancient languages of Hebrew and Sanskrit, when spoken, create a vibratory frequency that move matter into sacred geometrical patterns upon further investigation. Hebrew, Sanskrit, Aramaic, Arabic, and other elder dialects have older roots in a parent language of Gaelic and quite possibly an even earlier origin. In Swami Murugesu's The Science of Mantra, he claims that when a person chants a specific word in Sanskrit while filming a burning candle, the intensity as well as the color of the flame would change due to the frequency that the word would emit. This same science has been shown to lower and raise blood pressure, and in his own words contain certain sounds that can affect our circulation and nervous system. Whatever change such vibrations cause extends to the mind of a person and also to the surrounding atmosphere, causing warmth or coolness. All this can be known by study and shown by practice. This rediscovered knowledge of the science of sounds shows that sound is more than vibratory signals. Not only that sound interact with life, but it sustains and develops it. It acts as a conduit of conscious intent between people, societies, and entire civilizations. Yet the psychic illness we endure due to the domination of our false ego is reflected in the collective. Our psychological schisms have shut us off from our communicating correctly with our inner self, which is exactly how cancer cells within the body operate. In the collective, we have created a language barrier between humanity and the rest of nature, acting as a global cancer. Kymatica, 2009. The pseudo-culture or the scam culture is a term expressed in the Syncronist to acknowledge that what the human being of an industrialized nation recognizes as a nation's culture is not actually that. We acknowledge that this term would be better prefixed with the pseudo, which makes the term more appropriate to its context when considered the societal scams that plague the human beings of industrialized nations. There is no cultivation or growth of the human being within society in general. The word culture comes from the Latin word cultura, which means growing, and since there is barely any cultivation or growth, we should not identify our circumstance as a culture, but as a degradation. There are indeed some aspects of human beings' existence that are being cultivated, but what is being cultivated is more filth, lies, degradation, murder, crimes, and illness. So when the pseudo-culture is mentioned, it is referring to the intricate and ancient system of lies that have been told, a trickery that has been perpetuated, disguised and dressed as honesty, as well as the development and rehabilitation of the masses of people. This system that the human being has established on planet Earth is often regarded to as a culture, but as previously stated, should not be regarded as such since there is no true growth or development within the people overall. Instead of growth, its opposite is perpetuated and paid for because if the masses of people are not aware of the true nature of things, they will be more easily manipulated and led to do things that the pseudo-culture has designed for them to do, which is threaten and sabotage the survival and flow of prosperity within the individual and among the people. One may be unsure exactly how lies are disguised as truth, but one must understand and study these methods to understand how lies maintain themselves and how liars have obtained some of the most powerful positions in the world. Let us examine an undercover police officer. On the surface, the officer may appear to be a friendly pedestrian, but in actuality, the officer is a cop trying to catch or accuse people of committing crimes. This sneaky tactic of literal disguise from an authority that is supposed to serve and protect is an example of how lies disguise themselves as truth. It may appear as though the police officer in uniform has the duty to serve and protect culture or the community, but in actuality, the duty of the officer is to serve and protect the institutions that the officer works for, and not the people that are the subjects of those institutions. Similarly, the lie of the industrialized culture is actually just a pseudo-culture in disguise. The cornerstone of what the human being identifies as culture and the industrialized nation have never been designed to cultivate the development, survival, or prosperity of the human existence. They have almost since its very conception been established to keep the human being from prosperity and full potential. The elements of culture, art, creation, religion, politics, education, health, and the like are not components of our cultivation and development, but are the degradation of the human being. Every single aspect of what culture should be is reversed as a tool of destruction. This will be explained in more detail in later installments, but let it be known, the popular arts of this civilization have been reduced to the degradation of mind through a variety of tactics. These schemes numb the consciousness, distract from priorities, and hang the human being by their ability to perceive through the senses. The element of religion as an institution have further imprisoned the people. Through emotional appeal and tactics used to strike fear in the ill-informed and emotionally distraught, the religious institutions have brainwashed their subjects in order to guarantee that they are subservient, weak, and are used as energy to harvest the growth of these institutions that purposely keep the truth from their subjects in order to keep them ignorant. The elements of politics and economics have not been designed to cultivate the masses. Instead, the names politics and economics have been the primary disguise of forces used to cripple the power of the majority. Wickedness is often disguised and dressed under the terms politics and economics. We can understand that these terms are merely mechanisms of distraction to do as one pleases and take or claim what does not belong to them. Through the establishment of trivial and frivolous contracts, meetings, motions in law, oaths, and the like, all become fronts to keep powerful people in control. Regardless of what it may seem on paper or what one may utter in an oath, the human being will do as it desires, that may sometimes be to isolate itself from the contractual obligations. All attempts to document and bound the human being to contracts, laws, and other bondage is utilized to bind the ideas of the individual first and foremost. The act of politics, money, and etc. are all perpetuated to further box in the intellect and thinking power of the individual. God in person. The element of education has long collapsed and proven itself to be a perversion of real education. I will go into detail later about what the purpose of an education system should be and explain alternatives to the current situation at hand. But for now, I will simply say here that students within the industrialized education complex are not becoming more intelligent, self-sufficient, or wiser than the classroom. The classrooms in the industrialized nation are designed for the degradation of the mind, body, and finances of the student, nothing more. In most cases, teachers and instructors push a corporate agenda in order to further perpetuate the imprisonment of intellect. One of the many illusions within the realms of education is that the education system is one of the good institutions of the world, similar to the hospital, nursing homes, or grocery stores that try to paint a public image associated with that of goodness and prosperity. Opposite of the prison, the school is where you go if you want to be something. The education system is presented as the ideological opposite of the prison system, but in reality, they are quite similar in the way that they operate and indoctrinate. Really, what the human being does indeed sometimes learn within these complexes is to adopt the ideological limitations for what is capable for the human being. Unfortunately, students as a result often spend much of their youth working and stressing the mind to come up with ways to pay for the excess debt they have summoned upon their families. The element of health as it relates to culture is one of the most intriguing because it teaches on health, i.e., individual health being taught as a component of a vast holistic system of internal and external concepts or compartments, is almost completely non existent in the education complex. If education in general does not inform one of the strategies of health or does not teach one how to survive and prosper, it is useless. Health is holistic, and one would do best to regard their individual health in relationship to at least everything around and inside of themselves. As presented in previous chapters, all divisions and compartments of experience are established first and only by the mind. These barriers that separate the human being from the rest of existence do not exist anywhere but within the mind. To not acknowledge the health of the human being as a part of a complete and vast system of infinite relationships is failure to see the health of the individual in its fullness. The health of the individual depends on all things internal and external, especially things in immediate vicinity. The education complex has not led to the prosperity of the individual or the collective. Instead, it has achieved and prioritized its degradation. Therefore, a pseudoculture is further perpetuated. Lastly, art, or all things created by human beings, has always been in some capacity the driving force in maintaining the presence of virtue, nobility, and the opposition to evil. whether or not it be tools used directly or indirectly, overthrow or resist the regime, or intriguing, a melange of colors and symbols that reveal perspective on the world that has been forgotten, or the piece of beauty that stands in one's fortress and hopes to remind the human being of beauty within themselves. Creation stands as a language in which the human being experiences, expresses, and moves more in depth. The philosophy of art will be expressed in later works, but in relationship to this chapter on pseudo, we must understand that the way of the builder or artist has, of course, been polluted. On the grand scale, the builder in his fullness is not polluted or corrupted. The human being builds and does so for the advancement and prosperity and the civilization of the synchronists. All human beings acknowledge themselves in some capacity to builders, a necessary component to present experience. The builder in fullness has and will always be steady in their understanding of the self and their duty. The way of the builder has indeed become polluted. In this dimension, instead of prioritizing prosperity as a driving force behind the act of manifesting, it has become common to build in order to further the degradation of the individual and the people as a whole. Since the human being is not self-realized, the human being's pursuit to build has been forged out of the interests of the corrupt and powerful minority. The human being sometimes thinks that they are practicing the way of art to progress or the way of the healer, but in actuality, these are just perversions in what the human being should be prioritizing if they were self-realized. The person who is not self-realized is not being qualified to lead and has been failed to accept the position as God, nor do they acknowledge any relationship that they may have with God, and as a result, they are totally oblivious of the infinite relationship to the infinite. The human being becomes obsessive over the prioritizations of a perversion of only one of the realms. For example, the human being may be practicing the way of the builder in order to increase their financial wealth. But the resources they wish to obtain through wealth are not to advance themselves, but to move more quickly, publicly, and fashionably in their own life and tarnish the relationships that they have. They are not educated or self realized, and as a result, are unaware of the resources that they can obtain to help maximize health, prolong survival, improve relationships, heal the world, explore alternative realities, and oppose evil. These artists have become puppets of an evil hand, and they are totally unaware of their stupefying ignorance of the world around them, themselves, the meaning of life, and of their relationship with God. In another case, the human being may practice the way of the builder in order to maintain the heart or in some aspect of emotional health. Often the human being is so emotionally fractured and so ignorant that they are creating in order to stimulate aspects of the ego or institutions that enslave the people through the senses. Builders of this variety are not merely creating to improve themselves emotionally, they are also creating in order to arrogantly further indulge in their own ignorance as an alternative to submitting themselves to a mentor who may be wise and more knowledgeable and can save them from their arrogance, stubborn, and crippling fearfulness. These artists are not totally aware that they operate as pawns of the elite in order to further establish wickedness by brainwashing the people into a level of mindlessness through numbing the senses. They encourage the engagement of frivolous conversation that can only be maintained by the mind state of fools. Though all of this is true, it is, in many cases, still the best for the artist to create stubbornly and out of arrogance and fearfulness. Often it will be better for the human being overall to practice the arts out of ignorance as opposed to not being concerned with the arts at all. The aspects of the pseudo-culture will be further analyzed in future works, but it is important to understand that in almost every major component of culture, we see it is constructed to rot away the body and consciousness. Until the human being realizes that the industrialized nation in which they occupy is in actuality a pseudo-culture, they will be living a life of foolishness. The fool is constantly being manipulated, tricked, scammed, and conditioned to stay away from and be fearful of the truth. The human being is being manipulated to be drained of their energy to fuel the corruptions that maintain the desire for absolute power all over the world. Realize that every component of what is supposed to be culture is actually the way of the degradation of the people. Accepting this is, for many, the first step to realizing one's full potential. If then you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot apprehend God. For like is known by like. Leap clear of all that is corporeal, and make yourself grown to a like expanse with that greatness which is beyond all measure. Rise above all time and become eternal. Then you will apprehend God. Think. that for you, too, nothing is impossible. Deem that you, too, are immortal, and that you are able to grasp all things in your thought. To know every craft and science, find your home in the haunts of every living creature. Make yourself higher than all heights and lower than all depths. Bring together in yourself all opposites of quality, heat, cold, dryness, and fluidity. Think that you are everywhere, at once, on land, at sea, in heaven. Think that you are not yet begotten, that you are in the womb, that you are young, that you are old, that you have died, that you are in the world beyond the grave. Grasp in your thought all of this at once, all times and places, all substances and qualities and magnitudes together. Then you can apprehend God. But if you shut up your soul and your body and abase yourself and say, I know nothing, I can do nothing, I am afraid of earth and sea, I cannot mount to heaven, I cannot know what I was, nor what I shall be, then what have you to do with God? Hermes, Trismegistus, Hermetica, the Greek Corpus Hermeticum, and the Latin Asclepius, and a New English translation, with notes and introduction. End of The Synchronist by M. Kaiba. Read by him. To support more of him's work, go to patreon.com/Jabril Power.